Place, huh? My stepmother chuckled as she rolled her luggage past me, sunglasses already perched on her surgically frozen face. My dad, trailing behind her with his ever-silent presence, added with a smug grin, "Let her. A little fantasy never hurt anyone." They both laughed, like they shared some inside joke I was never meant to understand. I stood at the bottom of the stairs in my worn hoodie, arms crossed, watching them with a calm so dangerous it could have split steel. I didn't blink. I didn't smile. I just memorized their laughter. Then I said, "Safe travels." I meant it, because that would be the last time they'd ever walk out that door and believe it was their home. The front door shut with a loud, final click. I exhaled and smiled. Not because I was free, but because the final piece of my plan had just locked into place. 6 years. That's how long I'd been living like a tenant in my own mother's house. 6 years of watching my father morph into a stranger who didn't care that he'd married a woman who treated me like hired help. 6 years of swallowing every eye roll. She's just dramatic. Every time they brought guests over and made me serve wine like I was the staff.
My room was the attic.
I wasn't allowed to touch the thermostat. I wasn't part of family photos. But I was done. Quietly done. And you'd be surprised what a quiet girl can do when no one's watching. The moment their car turned the corner, I moved fast. I headed straight for the office downstairs, my late mother's old studio, now rebranded as Patricia's meditation space. She'd filled it with crystals, fake boho rugs, and candles that smelled like rot. But what she didn't realize was that the floorboards under the shelf were hollow. And beneath them, I'd hidden the original deed to the house. In my name.
Yes, mine.
Before she passed, my mother had rewritten the will. She knew. Somehow, she knew what would happen. And just 2 weeks before her final hospital stay, she made it official. If anything happened to her, the house was mine. Not Dad's. Mine. But I never told them. I needed to wait. For the right time. And that time was now. I took out the document, blew off the dust, and pressed my trembling fingers against the paper. A wave of grief rushed over me, powerful and raw. I could still smell my mom's perfume on the corners of the studio. I hadn't let myself cry in years, not where they could see. But right now, tears fell freely. Not just for what I'd endured, but for how far I'd come. I didn't evict them. I didn't shout. I didn't send a notice through lawyers. I did something better. I called a locksmith. Within 2 hours, the locks were changed. Every single one. Then, I packed their things, every last piece of clothing, jewelry, hairdryer, necktie, and yoga mat, and had them stored in a local facility. Paid up for 6 months. I wasn't heartless. Just precise. I left a card in the mailbox with the address of the storage unit. And one sentence written in black marker across the envelope. She owns the place. But revenge wasn't the only thing on my mind. There were kindnesses to repay too. The next morning, I opened the back gate and invited in my neighbor, Miss Clara, an elderly widow who used to sit on her porch and slip me cookies when I came home late from double shifts. I handed her a basket of groceries I bought from the farmer's market and gave her the sunroom key. "It's yours," I told her. "To sit, rest, read, or cry if you need." She cried and hugged me. I walked through the house slowly that night, barefoot, letting the silence press against me like a soft blanket. For the first time in years, it felt like home again. Not haunted, not cold.
Mine.
But the story doesn't end there. Because 2 days later, they came back. And the scene on the front lawn? Let's just say it was cinematic. They came back 2 days early. I was standing in the kitchen, pouring coffee into my favorite chipped mug, the one Patricia had once tried to throw away for ruining the aesthetic. The air smelled like fresh cinnamon rolls and lavender dish soap, and for the first time in years, I could hear birds chirping through the open window instead of Patricia's endless yoga playlists. Then came the pounding. Boom, boom, boom. I didn't flinch. I walked slowly to the front door, calm and grounded like a woman who had nothing left to lose, and everything to claim. When I opened it, there they were, still wearing airport grime and indignation like they were bulletproof armor. "What is this?" Patricia shrieked, yanking on the doorknob, stunned that it didn't turn. Why won't it open? What happened to the locks? Dad was quieter. His voice was low and tense. Sweetheart, open the door. This isn't funny. I didn't smile. I just leaned against the frame, sipping my coffee like it was the most casual morning in the world. Good morning, I said simply. You're back early. Thought you'd be gone all week. Patricia tried to push past me, but the deadbolt held firm. Let us in right now. We live here. I tilted my head, studying her like a puzzle I'd finally solved.
Do you?
Because last I checked, only the owner of this house lives here now. Their eyes narrowed in unison. Dad blinked. What are you talking about? I reached beside the doorframe, picked up the folder I'd left ready on the console table, and opened it. Mom's will. The original one. Filed with the county, notarized, everything legal and above board. She left the house to me. Fully. Not jointly. Not in trust. Mine. Patricia's face twisted. That's a lie. Your dad said. He didn't know. I cut her off gently. Because I never told him. And you? You were too busy redecorating my mom's kitchen to bother asking. The silence cracked between us. Then, slowly, Patricia's expression changed, from outrage to disbelief to something worse. Fear. Dad stepped forward, eyes on the folder. Let me see that. I handed it through the small opening in the door. He scanned it quickly, jaw tightening with every word. I never knew she did this, he murmured, eyes glassy. Yeah, I replied. Because you stopped listening to her long before she died. That hit harder than I thought it would. But I didn't take it back. He handed the document back, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. So, what? You're kicking us out? I paused. That was the moment. The moment that would define who I was, not just to them, but to myself. No, I said. I've already moved your things to a storage unit. 6 months paid. You can come back for them anytime. I even included your photo albums and your work files. Patricia scoffed. Oh, how generous. I looked at her, long and hard. You treated me like a guest in my own home. I was the girl who did your laundry, made your tea, and watched from the attic while you hosted parties in my mother's dining room. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I just watched.
But now?
I've remembered who I am. And I'm not your servant. She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. I'm not doing this to hurt you, I continued. I'm doing it to heal me. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out another envelope. This is the contact information of a counselor. Family mediation. If you want to talk things through someday, you can call. But not here.
Not now.
I handed it to my dad. He took it.
Silent.
And then I closed the door. Not with a slam, but with peace. Inside, my legs gave out. I slid to the floor, hands shaking. It wasn't anger that consumed me. It was release. For the first time, I had stood tall in my truth. But the real story was just beginning. Because when you reclaim your life, you start to see all the lives around you that are also waiting to be lifted. That evening, I visited the soup kitchen where I used to volunteer before Patricia banned me from wasting gas money on poor people. I stepped inside and was greeted with warmth, faces I hadn't seen in months, hands that reached out for hugs, and a few tearful smiles from people who remember me by name. I signed up for the weekend shift and promised to bring blankets next week. Later, I drove past my old college friend Mara's place. She'd called me a dozen times this year, but I never picked up because I was too ashamed of how isolated I'd become. I knocked on her door. When she opened it, she froze. Are you okay? I am now, I whispered, and hugged her so tight I nearly cracked a rib. But peace didn't last long. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my dad. He was staying in a motel. He sounded different.
Shaky.
Tired. Alone. I didn't know, he kept saying. I didn't know she treated you like that. There was a pause. Then, softly, he added, I let you disappear. I thought you were okay, because you didn't complain. But I see now that's not what okay looks like. I didn't forgive him. Not yet. But I listened. Because sometimes revenge isn't fire. Sometimes it's silence broken by truth. I met my father at a park near the old train station, a quiet place with rustling trees and fading benches. He was sitting alone, hunched over, staring at the ground like it held all the answers he'd missed for years. When he saw me, he stood, too quickly, like he was afraid I might change my mind and vanish. I didn't hug him, but I sat beside him. "Thanks for coming," he said, voice hoarse. I nodded. For a minute, neither of us spoke. The wind did the talking, brushing past us like a ghost from another life. "I don't know where to start," he finally whispered. "Start with why," I said. He looked confused. "Why did you let it happen?" I asked. "Why didn't you protect me?" His eyes welled up. "After your mom died, I didn't know how to be a father to a grieving daughter. I couldn't even be a husband to a dying wife. I checked out emotionally. I thought if I remarried and made things feel normal again, the pain would go away." I stayed quiet. "I didn't know Patricia would be so cruel," he added. I turned to him. "You didn't want to know." He swallowed hard. "You're right. It wasn't an apology. Not really. But it was the closest thing I'd ever get from a man who never cried at funerals." "I miss your mom," he murmured. "Every day. And I hate myself for how I handled everything after." I looked away. "I didn't just lose her," I said. "I lost you too." He lowered his head. "I'm trying," he said quietly. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I want to know you again. If you'll let me." I stood, brushed the leaves off my jeans. "I'm not ready," I said honestly. "But I'll think about it." His shoulders sagged with a strange mix of relief and sorrow. As I walked away, I didn't feel victorious. I felt human. And that was enough for now. The days that followed were filled with something new, freedom. I started small, painted the attic, turned it into a writing nook. I donated all the stiff, designer furniture Patricia brought in and filled the house with secondhand treasures that felt real, worn, lived in. I brought life back to the garden Mom once loved, dug up weeds, planted daffodils, and slowly I started hosting Sunday dinners. Not for blood relatives, but for chosen family. Miss Clara from next door, Mara and her toddler, even Julio, the young man who worked at the soup kitchen and was saving for college. People who had given me kindness when I had nothing to give back. But the shadows weren't gone. One rainy evening, I came home to find Patricia waiting on the front porch under an umbrella that matched her raincoat, polished, perfect, and completely out of place against the rawness of my world. "I need to talk," she said. I hesitated, then opened the door just enough. She stepped in, eyes scanning the space she no longer recognized. It wasn't her palace anymore. No sterile whites. No cold gray tones. Just warmth.
Life.
"I'm not here to fight," she began. I said nothing. "I've been staying at a friend's. Your dad's still at the motel." She looked around again, this time softer. "This place feels like your mom again." I folded my arms. "It is." Her mouth twitched, like she wanted to argue. But she didn't. Instead, she said something I never expected. "I was threatened by you." I blinked. "You reminded him of her. Every day. Your eyes, your voice, your strength. I couldn't compete with a ghost. So I turned you into a nuisance." I stared at her. "You didn't just turn me into a nuisance," I said slowly. "You tried to erase me." She nodded. No denial. No excuses. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Not because I lost the house, but because I lost a chance to be better. And you had every reason to hate me, but you didn't throw me to the streets. You paid for storage. You didn't slam the door. You left the window open." Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. "Why are you really here?" I asked. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope.
A check.
For $10,000. "It's from the equity I withdrew without your dad's knowledge a year ago. I wanted to remodel the kitchen." I narrowed my eyes. "I'm returning it. It's not much, but it's yours." I hesitated, then took it. Because forgiveness isn't always soft. Sometimes it's a ledger being balanced. That night, I sat in the sunroom, check in hand, rain tapping the windows like a lullaby. I wasn't sure what would come next, but I knew I had reclaimed more than just a house. I had reclaimed my voice, and that was the start of everything. The next few months became a quiet revolution in my life. I enrolled in a part-time psychology course at the community college downtown. I wanted to understand how people fractured and how they healed. I figured if I could survive what I'd been through and still feel empathy for the ones who hurt me, maybe I had something to offer others too. My house had changed. Not just the look, but the feeling. It had heart again. I'd painted the walls in deep, comforting hues, moss green in the kitchen, warm sienna in the living room, navy blue in the hallway that led to Mom's old bedroom. It didn't scream wealth or elegance. It whispered peace. I filled the bookshelves with secondhand novels. Started cooking meals I remembered my mother making on cold winter nights. Beef stew, banana bread, cinnamon sugar toast for dessert. I donated Patricia's expensive wine fridge and replaced it with a coffee bar for my Sunday guests. The people I welcomed into this space weren't connected by blood, but by grace. One Sunday evening, Mara brought over a girl she'd met at work. Her name was Danny, barely 19, with bruises hidden under sleeves too long for summer. She was quiet, twitchy, always watching the door. I knew that look. I invited her to stay for dinner. She barely touched her food, but she asked for seconds on the cinnamon toast. That was enough. Over time, Danny opened up. She'd run away from her foster home, worked 2 jobs, slept in a coworker's car for a week. The last time she saw her birth parents, she was 12. No one had told her, "I'm proud of you," in years. I made her a deal. She could live in the attic, rent-free, as long as she kept going to work and agreed to apply for her GED. She stared at me like I'd offered her the moon. "You sure?" she asked. "People don't just do that." I smiled. "They do now." She moved in the next day. One morning, a few weeks later, I woke up to the smell of burnt toast and the sound of quiet cursing from the kitchen. Danny was standing there in oversized socks, panicked over a smoking toaster. She turned and said, "I was trying to surprise you. I swear it looked easy on YouTube." I laughed harder than I had in months. "Come on," I said, opening the window to let the smoke out. "Let's mess it up together." That morning, over failed pancakes and laughter that made my stomach hurt, I realized something. I wasn't rebuilding my life anymore. I was building others, too. Then one Saturday, there was a knock on the door. I opened it and saw my father. He looked different. Not just older.
Smaller. Softer.
Humbled. He held a book in one hand, Mom's favorite poetry collection, and a small potted lavender plant in the other. "I thought she'd like this near her window," he said. "If you still have a room." I stepped aside. Let him in. He didn't look around. He went straight to the back bedroom, placed the lavender on the windowsill, opened the book to a page he'd bookmarked. Then he sat down on the edge of the bed and cried. I didn't interrupt. We sat in silence for over an hour. No accusations. No blame. Eventually, he looked up at me. "I've started therapy," he said. "I don't want to repeat old patterns. I know it's late, but I'm here now." I nodded. Then I told him about Danny, about the Sunday dinners, about Miss Clara, about the soup kitchen, about the tiny community this house had become. He listened, and for once he really heard me. Weeks later, he asked if he could help. So I gave him a task: fix the broken garden bench Mom used to sit on. He came every Saturday with a toolbox and a quiet determination. He brought Danny a set of basic tools, taught her how to use a drill. She never said it, but I could tell. It was the first time she'd ever had a father figure treat her like she mattered. And me? I watched it unfold like a sunrise after a long, bitter night. Not perfect, but possible. Then came fall. The leaves turned burnt orange and blood red, and the house looked like something out of a novel. The porch light glowed warmly in the evenings, casting soft shadows as neighbors walked by and smiled at the laughter echoing from the kitchen. That's when I knew it was time. Time to forgive. Not forget, but release. One crisp evening, I gathered everyone, Mara, Danny, Miss Clara, even my dad, and lit a fire in the backyard pit. We shared stories, toasted marshmallows, talked about heartbreak, healing, and how the quietest people often carry the loudest storms inside them. When everyone left, my dad lingered. "I know I don't deserve this," he said, staring at the stars. "But thank you for letting me back in." I rested my hand on his shoulder. "You're not all the way back in," I said honestly, "but you're closer than you were." He nodded, eyes misty. Then he whispered, "Your mother would be proud." Winter came with snowfall that painted everything white and soft. Danny passed her GED. Mara started a small bakery with a few recipes we tested in my kitchen. Miss Clara turned the sunroom into a mini library with donations from around the neighborhood. And me? I got a letter. A scholarship. Partial tuition to study full-time and pursue counseling professionally. I sat at the kitchen table, holding that letter, hands shaking. I could still hear Patricia's voice from years ago. "You'll never make it out of this house." She was right. I didn't make it out. I made it mine. One Sunday night, as we shared dinner, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, hot cocoa for dessert, Danny stood up. She was nervous, fidgeting. Then she looked at me and said, "You saved me. This house saved me." I shook my head. "You saved yourself. I just made sure the door was unlocked." She laughed, and everyone clapped like it was a graduation ceremony. It felt like it. There's no dramatic ending. No explosive twist. Just a truth. A girl once told to stay silent, once pushed to the attic, once overlooked and dismissed, now owned more than a house. She owned her voice, her story, her future. And she made damn sure no one would ever smirk and say,